Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, this is the Canadian real estate market update with a focus on Vancouver coming at you every Saturday. If you like these videos, if you get any sort of value or entertainment out of them, hit thumbs up, subscribe. I appreciate the support. As always, if you have any questions or comments, put those below and I'll answer them. Obviously a massive week for BC real estate with the new NDP policies coming out. So basically what I want to do is I want to highlight all those policies. I'm going to explain them and then I'm going to provide my analysis on them in terms of how I think this might impact the market, potential workarounds and that sort of thing. Obviously, if you haven't read those policies, there's a link below to a blog post where I basically summarize the most important of their 30-point action plan on affordable housing. First and foremost, the one I want to talk about off the hop is the increase in the foreign buyers tax from 15% to 20%, and then including that in areas that were previously exempt. This tax is now virtually province-wide, except for a couple areas. So they've now introduced the foreign buyers tax into other areas such as Victoria, Nanaimo, the Fraser Valley, and the Okanagan. Again, that's all pretty much our major markets here in BC. That's the one, and then again, increasing that from 15 to 20%. That was implemented and active as of February 21st, so that is now in play. That's first and foremost. Secondly is the speculation tax, which is another huge move. I didn't really think they would roll that out. I know that it was previously lobbied by a whole bunch of local economists here that put together a report in 2016. It looks like they've modeled their own version of that, but basically what it is later this year in the fall, there's going to be a speculation tax if you don't declare BC income tax. If you're not paying appropriate share of BC income tax, you will pay a 0.5% of your home's value of tax. So if you own $1 million home, that's $5,000, and then in 2019 it gets bumped up to 2%. So again, on $1 million home, that's $20,000, and that's on an annual basis. If you're not declaring and working, if you're not paying a BC income tax, you are going to be subject to that. So there's a lot of questions about this tax, and I think the devil is going to be in the details. It seems like they don't have a full announcement on all the exact specifics of it. There's been a lot of questions over the last couple of days I've been trying to answer, reaching out to various economists and people in the media, etc. And there doesn't seem to be an exact clear answer, but from what I understand, words from Carol James, the finance minister, is basically this tax is going to target satellite families. Obviously, again, we see a typical scenario where, say, the mom and the daughter are living here, and maybe the daughter's going to school or whatever, and the dad's overseas and funneling money over. That's considered a satellite family. So the NDP is saying this is who the tax is designed to target. It's also going to target outside investors. So even though you are, say, Canadian and you pay a Canadian income tax, but you're from Alberta not paying a BC income tax, you're also going to be subject to that. So that was one of the ones that we got some clarity on. I think that is massively substantial, but again, I'm going to talk about the details and specifics of that after I sort of recap these. So again, it's a 2% speculation tax on your home's value, assessed value, each and every year if you're not declaring a BC income tax. And then last but not least, I think one of the bigger ones is the increase on the property transfer tax for really luxury homes. It's essentially a tax on the rich, and again, I'm not going to get into the political side of that, whether you agree with it or not. It's obviously an extremely polarizing topic. But essentially what it is, so how it was structured, and the BC Liberal government's brought in an increase to that property transfer tax, I believe it was last year. So how it works is, as of today, the property transfer tax is 1% on the first $200,000 and then 2% on the remaining balance, and then the Liberals introduced up to $2 million, so saying if your property is, say, $3 million, as soon as it hits that $2 million, you pay an additional 3% tax on that value. So And then the NDP then brought in saying, okay, well now if your home's above 3 million, we're actually going to charge you an additional 5% property transfer tax. So how the whole structure works out now is on the first 200,000, 1% on the first 200, 2% on the balance up to 2 million, where it then increases to 3%, and then anything above 3 million increases to 5%. So yeah, I mean, basically it's a substantial tax. I look at it, this is going to impact that luxury market. It's just further taxation, right? I'm not going to get into those specifics, but first and foremost, I want to talk on how I think this all shapes up, how I think this plays into the market. The foreign buyers tax, which was, again, previously exempt in many of the areas throughout BC, is now coming to Victoria and Nanaimo. I think that's going to have a psychological impact on those markets, much like it did in Vancouver and in Toronto. It had initial shock, and then obviously some of these markets have worn it off, some haven't, some segments haven't worn it off, such as that detached higher end segment. So I think it's going to have definitely a psychological impact. I think that increase in taxation from 15 to 20% is really going to hurt that luxury market that's already taking a substantial beating right now. As I mentioned to you, I believe in the last video, there was a local luxury brokerage here that works primarily on the west side of Vancouver that came out and said in a more secretive email that they felt the government had gone too far, that these taxes were quite egregious, and sales activity is, quite frankly, abysmal in those areas. They had prices down 10 to 15% from the peak. And this announcement from them was prior to the NDP's most recent changes. So you can imagine how they feel today with these policy changes. So I look at that luxury market just to put an example into context of how these taxes are going to work and affect that market, which is heavily dependent on that foreign income and foreign buyers coming in to support those house prices. When you've had a huge huge slowdown, not only from, say, a foreign buyers tax and primarily from a Chinese capital control perspective, these taxes, so if you're a foreign buyer coming in today, if you buy a $4 million home, you are going to pay $920,000 in taxes right off the hop. And that doesn't include a potential speculation tax if you are eligible for that. You know, if you don't pay your BC income tax and this tax does capture you, now you're going to have to tack on, you know, a 2% tax every year on top of your $4 million home. That is substantial. But again, a $4 million purchase today, just with the 20% foreign buyers tax and the property transfer tax, equates to $920,000. So I think that's substantial. That's gonna weigh on that luxury market even more. You know, if you see here in this chart, the home sales above $3 million peaked in March of 2016, and they really haven't recovered since. They're basically printing lower lows. I don't see how that market is going to rebound after all these changes coming into that market. I just think there's going to be further and further downwards pressure on that. And of course, it's hard to say how that adjusts to the lower segments of the market, but that speculation tax will really be the devil in the details. One thing that's not really getting enough attention is that Carol James specifically said that this tax is going to apply to other Canadians that aren't paying BC income taxes, such as Albertans. And what doesn't get enough media attention, and this is really my job to try to provide analysis and information from a statistical standpoint, not so much my beliefs, but if you look at 2007 Land Court data, which is pulled from BC Titles, the outside investment into BC real estate, so foreign buyers, 67% of foreign buying sales in 2007 were from Albertans. So it wasn't from people from China, it wasn't from people from the United States, it wasn't from people from Ottawa. It was 67% of foreign sales in the year 2007 were from Albertans. And that data has not since been updated and released into the public because BC Land Titles is essentially monopolizing the data, and they're not releasing that any longer to Land Court, from what I understand. But I mean, how those numbers changed, I'm almost certain they have. But for anyone that would have guessed, 67% from Albertans. So now this tax, the speculation tax, is going to apply to Albertans if they're not renting out their property year round. And the reality of the situation is a lot of these Albertans, these are summer homes and summer cabins, in the Okanagan and parts of Vancouver, maybe Victoria. And so they're either going to be forced to sell, they're going to have to rent it out long term, or they'll pay a 2% speculation tax. So I think, in my opinion, that's going to be substantial. Do we see a flood of new listings? I don't know. I don't know how people digest and react to this. Again, it's going to be, we're going to have to wait till we get exactly all the details about how this all plays out. But another one of the concerns was, okay, well, if I'm a BC resident, I own 2 homes, maybe one of them's a summer home, I'm paying local income taxes, but my income is very low. Am I subject then to the speculation tax? Because the speculation tax exempts your primary residence if you're paying income tax here. From what I understand, is basically on that second home, to avoid, you're going to get a tax rebate, which will help you avoid basically paying a speculation tax. If you pay income tax here, of course. So basically, to summarize, I know that's a little bit confusing. You're going to get an income tax rebate if you own more than one property and it's not your primary residence, you're not renting it out long term. But again, whether that rebate covers the whole speculation tax is up for debate, again, because we don't know all the exact details. So obviously, as I find them out, I will let you know. But as it stands right now, the speculation tax could be seriously impactful, but it's much too early to say because I don't know exactly all the details. I don't know how many loopholes and workarounds there's going to be with that. People have already been sending me all these crazy queries and questions and scenarios where people could potentially be exempt, and the truth of the matter is I don't know, because I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know all the legal implications, and we don't have the details from the NDP. That's where things stand. I think that, in my opinion, the NDP government, they had their backs up against the wall. This always happens if you go back and study financial history, previous housing booms, busts, really any financial asset that rises in value to an extreme length. There's always political backlash from people, and they put pressure on governments to intervene and bring in policies. And the reality situation is governments almost always tend to go too far in one direction. I think that they have, because my belief is that a lot of this affordability issue is on the mortgage side. We haven't even played out arguably one of the biggest changes in Canadian mortgage history was the mortgage stress test in January. That the implications of that stress test haven't even come into play yet. And now we're tacking on more. So again, I'm not saying I agree with it or disagree with it. I'm just saying, I think when your GDP is 25% real estate and you have this crazy frothy market coming in with all these policies all at once without I just think they are potentially going to have to retract some of these, whether that's in 6 months or a year or 2 years or 3 years. There's no doubt we'll see some changes, but that's how things stand, right? So, I'm just trying to remember here if there's anything else I really want to touch on, but we'll really have to wait and see. I think that for me, the biggest one and the most obvious one is the taxation of these luxury properties and of these foreign investors, so to speak. I just think that is just going to really push down on that luxury market. I am curious to see how this impacts potentially the pre-sale market, again, where you're paying a huge premium today. Developers are pretty much chips all in on building, and does this have them start to retract from supply? How do they maneuver through this market? Again, with all these policy changes, construction costs are an all-time high. So they are basically relaying those construction costs back onto people that are paying a 20 to 30% premium today above market value in order to secure these properties. And the government, Carol James, has come out and said, our goal, our mandate behind these policies is to bring affordable housing. We want house prices to moderate. And if it so happens that house prices come lower, that's the reality of the situation. That's how we get down to affordability. And again, that's Carol James speaking, not me. So when your government's mandate is saying, hey, we are focusing towards lower house prices, that's the intention of that. How does the market then digest that? Again, and particularly in that pre-sale market space where I think you have a ton of people need to reconsider the potential drawbacks of that situation, right? With rising mortgage rates as well. Where is that market, and how is your financing situation going to be in 2 years? I think it creates certainly a lot of uncertainty, and for you to be paying a premium to take on that uncertainty, again, doesn't really make much sense to me. But I mean, again, just to summarize quickly before I wrap this up, is all the policies that have been introduced. Really, if you think about it over the last year and a half, I'll just break them down. I might miss a couple here, so feel free to correct me. But we had in Vancouver, in BC, we had a shadow flipping ban. We've had a 15% foreign buyers tax. We've had an increase in the property transfer tax not once but twice. You've had an empty homes tax in Vancouver. You've had an Airbnb ban in Vancouver. You've had the foreign buyers tax then increased. You've had a speculation tax now. You've had 2 mortgage stress tests, rising interest rates. The Bank of Canada was now hiked, I think, 3 times. They're planning on hiking more this year. All these measures coming together on top of the housing market. And these regulators really haven't let these policies progress and play out. So again, it's really just everyone just piling in on top. So again, I'm curious to see how this market shapes up. Obviously, I'll keep you updated regardless of what happens. You know, as it stands today, right now, the sentiment within the industry is, of course, is always bullish, but the luxury market is under some serious pressures. The entry-level market, particularly in the Fraser Valley, I had a realtor earlier this week call me and tell me that there's 32 offers on a townhouse in Chilliwack. So clearly that segment is alive and well. Prices are still skyrocketing in that Fraser Valley. It's just absolutely insane. But yeah, we'll wait and see how these things shape up. Again, if you have any questions, comments, put that below and we'll banter back and forth. See ya.